For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. All right, episode 49 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Here we go. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure you're subscribed to the show if you're enjoying it. We have new episodes the first and third Friday of every month. You can also find out more info at buffaloroamer.com. We got trips, fishing blog, just fun stories and journal entries from some different adventures, all there. Okay, today's episode is a good one. Alec Beraducci is on the podcast. Alec is a geophysicist out of Denver, Colorado. He's a good friend from college. He is a rafter. He's an outdoorsman and an all-around good guy. So I had a good time talking about all kinds of fun stuff in the outdoor world with Alec Beraducci on episode 49 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. I'm stoked to talk about all kinds of things. I want to talk about rafting, about the Brooks Range, about the Grand, about some of your travels and stuff. But first, you just recently got off this trip up in the Brooks Range on the rafting trip. Sounded amazing. We got to catch up at the wedding we were at recently. Tell me about the rafting trip. Where'd you go exactly again?
All right, so we rafted a river called the Hula Hula. It was actually kind of a bigger river than I was expecting coming out of the north side of the Brooks Range. And you raft from like its headwaters right past the biggest mountains in the Brooks Range, then through the Arctic Plateau, Arctic Plains, something like that, right into the Arctic Ocean. And it's just a really cool trip. But yeah, you fly out of Coldfoot, catch a little bush flight in with a kind of kooky pilot who's just knows exactly what he's doing, knows every little valley in the place, and gets you right to where you need to go. It was a pretty cool time.
Sounds like Alaska, man. That's funny. What's one of the things I have written down and one of my thoughts is just like one of my offhand thoughts is bush pilots. Because, dude, it's like I feel like you could have bush pilot stories for days. I need to get a bush pilot on the show is what I need, because those guys have got to be the, like, I don't want to say the 1%, but like the 1% of like crazy outdoor like whack jobs. Like not whack jobs, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. Like if I can get this guy's number, I want to give it to you to see if you can reach out to him. His name is Dirk. There's two pilots that fly out of Coldfoot that we know of.
Okay.
One is named Dirk, one is named Kirk. So that's confusing in its own right, but this dude, his name is Dirk. He's been flying out of there for, I think, like 25 or 30 years now, has 4 planes, and just every valley you come across, he's got a different story about, how he saw some wolverine running down that ridge line, or like how, there's been like a grizzly fight over here. Just that guy's seen so much more than like, anybody else ever will. You see so much from the book,
man,
from the planes.
And
it's amazing.
I want to get into all of it, and I feel like that's a cliche I say too often now. I want to get into it all, but the flight alone. I remember when I was in the Brooks Range. This would have been 20. Oh, I don't know when it would have been. It was a long time ago. 2010 or 11, maybe something like that. 2010.
Oh, nice.
We were flying in, and I'll never forget, as we were leaving, we all had bear spray on us, and the pilot was super specific about putting, absolutely no bear spray in the cabin. All bear spray has to go, in the floats underneath the boat. which thinking about it, obviously it's completely logical, but he was saying that in one of his trips, he had a bear spray in the cabin of the plane go off while they were in flight. And he had to,
No way.
I'll never forget, because he kind of like cracked the window to show us, like as he was doing it, he was like, yeah, he kind of like gave the window just a little crack where like all the air pressure came in. And he was like, I had to crack the window and fly the plane with my head out of the window and land with my head out of the window. He's like, my eyes are so watery, I couldn't even see. He's like, I'll never fly with bear spray again.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Dude, that's gnarly.
yeah.
Like,
It's so funny. And the stuff that they land on.
yeah. Oh man. So yeah, for our flight, like, it's so cool. You take off and you're already in some decent sized mountains. And then I had no idea how just sheer and huge the mountains are in the Brooks Range. They're just huge peaks you're flying between. And you've been doing that for like an hour and a half or so. And he's like, oh, all right, there's our airstrip over there. And you like kind of look all around and you're like, what do you mean there's our airstrip? Like there's nothing there, man. And then like you look a little harder and you're like, all right, I kind of see two lines where something might happen there. And, takes you right in. You bounce like 10 feet off the ground on the first hit. Then he sets it right down on the second one. And you're like, all right, you know what you're doing, but that is not a runway, man.
Yeah, a little gravel strip.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe some of the stuff that I've seen some of those bush pilots land on and take off of, like especially the ones they have like the super big soft tires that they just literally land on like a 50-foot gravel bar in the middle of the river, it seems like.
Yeah, they call them tundra tires, and that's exactly what our plane had, and that's pretty much what we did. It was, yeah. And then he's like, "Oh, this is the best airstrip, like on this part of the Brooks Range right here." Man, I'd hate to see the worst one.
So funny, so funny. So you hop out of a plane after all kinds of travel to get up to the Brooks, and you hop on a little puddle jumper that drops you off in the middle of the Brooks, somewhere on what's the name of the river?
The Hula Hula.
The Hula Hula. It's a good name.
Yeah. You'd think it was in Hawaii, but couldn't be further from the truth.
How big was your group and like gear and how long? Like, give me like the logistics, like the bullet list of the trip, I guess.
Cool. Yeah. So there were 9 of us going. Most the people were kind of older. Then there were 3 of us that were around my age, about 30 years old. And yeah, we rented our rafts, drove those up to Coldfoot. Then you kind of, figure out how to pack all of your stuff. So all your personal gear, your emergency gear.
How long was the trip?
Oh man, the drive from Fairbanks to Coldfoot probably took
days of your rafting trip.
Oh, of the rafting trip. Originally we had planned, I think 17, but because of smoke, that had kind of started on the south side of the Brooks Range, we cut it down to 15, kind of talking to the pilot. He's like, if you guys want to get out of here within the next, week, we got to go like really fast.
That's wild too, isn't that? That's the other, not to keep interrupting your stuff here, but that's the other interesting thing about those trips is you're at the mercy of Mother Nature. It's especially up there. It's like, hey, if we can't get in and get you out, you're not getting out. There's like two bush pilot services or however many that run the entire Brooks, and if they can't fly to you, you're posted until you can.
Yeah, it's all on them. So it's like, okay, we had maybe like 3 or 4 days of extra food, but when he's like, all right, it can be an extra week, and we're like, yeah, I don't think we want to just stay on some barrier island on the Arctic Ocean being polar bear food for a week. So we wrapped it up a couple days early, but honestly, it was for how long the river was. It was only about 100 miles of rafting, and it was really swift current. So the rafting went really quickly, and we were able to spend a lot of time just being in the Brooks Range and kind of hiking around and seeing the amazing wildlife and stuff up there.
That's awesome. And so like how did your days break down as far as hours in the raft versus exploring, or like what would a typical day look like?
So it was actually kind of different than any other raft trip I'd been on. We had more time than we knew what to do with. And that right from the first day, we're like, wow, we're at the headwaters in the Brooks Range. Let's just take a layover day here. So I think literally every other day we took a layover day from the
wow.
river, and we're able to just go on like long hikes up into the mountains or just kind of hang around camp reading, depending. The weather up there is pretty dicey this time of year. So some days you're like, it's 40 degrees out and just pelting rain down all day. I think I'm just going to stay in my tent for this one.
Yeah, that sounds rough.
But where you are, it's fine. You just like go ahead and read a book. If you didn't have a book, oh man, I go crazy though.
Two questions, and I guess I'll ask them as two separate questions. First, how would you describe the Brooks, or I guess particularly the area you were at, the Hula Hula River and that valley? Like, how would you describe that area to somebody who had never been there?
It sounds cliche, but as the prettiest place I've ever been.
Awesome.
I've been like to like a lot of places around the world, and nothing really compares to that. It's so untouched. Just there's these white snow-capped mountains behind you that spill into this glacial valley, and like everywhere you look, there's wildlife. There's caribou over here, there's bear over there. As we were landing, we saw a black wolf on the runway. Like pretty much everything. It's just the most untouched place you've ever been, and so far from civilization and so pretty.
Yeah.
Like you've been there. You probably could.
No, it's
describe it as well or better than me. But
no,
yeah.
man, that was great. Absolutely. Yeah. It's barren, wild, like I assume it's the same, like tundra. You have those tussocks when you're hiking, which are like, it's like almost like a ball of mud that it's like swampland that has dry, like little balls of mud that you have to kind of hop between, but you can't really hop between them. They're more like ankle twisters because they kind of give out as you go between them.
Yeah, they're like made out of moss, so you like try and get a good push off one of them, and your foot sinks down 3 inches, and you don't quite make it to the next one, and just get up to your knees in your rubber boots, and you're like, oh, well, guess I'm going to be a little bit wet for a while. But yeah, it's okay. One of the crazier bits for me is there are no trees on the north side of the Brooks Range.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which I knew coming in, but it's really strange.
The tundra
for like me, where I'm used to big forests everywhere, that it's barren tundra. But it kind of makes the mountains just stick out that much more, and you're able to see that much more wildlife.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. It's like the whole valley, or like not the whole valley, the whole world around you is like knee to waist high shrubs and tundra and tussocks and not willows, but what are they called? Like
I think
are they willows?
There's some kind of willow. I think they are. Yeah, but they're pretty shrubby. They're pretty small, like 5-6 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly. Fighting through that stuff. Yeah, you're exactly right. Just completely barren, but so raw and beautiful too.
Yeah, there's just nowhere to hide out there. And
yeah, exactly.
It just makes it that much more exposed and like kind of real feeling.
How did you decide on this river and this trip in particular?
So one of the guys that was on our trip with us, he had actually run another Arctic river, maybe like 50 miles east or so, that also goes into the Arctic Ocean. So he kind of knew the Brooks Range a little bit and was like, I've like kind of heard rumors about this Hula Hula River, that it's raftable, it's good to go, and it's really pretty. So he kind of had the time of year as his idea, but then logistically everybody kind of started pitching in what we thought we could do and make it come together kind of like that. So it was his brainchild because he'd been up there before, but yeah, then taken over by the group.
Awesome, man. So great. And we were talking about the barren landscape, and so true is that it's so good for spotting wildlife because you can just see forever. There's no obstacles in your way. What was the wildlife up there for you?
Yeah. that was by far my favorite part of the trip. I'm like the most amateur of photographers, but I do like taking pictures.
Yeah.
Um, so we got pretty lucky. It was right during the middle of the caribou migration, and when we're up in the mountains, we're seeing herds of maybe 100 to 200 every day. And you're like, wow, man, there's so many of these. We have to have seen, 10,000 of them by the time you're like getting out of the valley. You're like, I don't know how this could get any cooler. They're such cool looking animals. Sometimes we'd be, within 40 or 50 feet of them, and they're right there. I've never seen a caribou before. But then we get out onto the plain, and this is where they go to have their babies. It's called I think it's the Porcupine River herd,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yep.
And man, the like only humans that we saw on the trip was this film crew that was there from like Discovery Channel or Nature or something like that, and they're like, man, you guys are in for a treat. There is like one of the giant aggregate herds kind of just downriver a little bit. We're like, oh, all right. Well, we've already seen a lot of caribou. How cool could that be? And we get down there, and literally we turn around a corner, and there were probably 5 to 10,000 caribou just everywhere that you could see. So like I have pictures of like little babies jumping into the river to swim across after their moms. Like there was one point, like it's a swift river. You can't just pull over in the middle of a caribou herd. Got to kind of keep going. But a bunch of them were fording the river in front of us. And literally we're like having to like row away from them, trying to dodge caribou like you would a rock in the raft, except they're kind of swimming one way, and then they're like, oh man, what's that thing coming for me, swimming back the other way.
Insane.
It was wild. Yeah. And so the caribou by far the biggest takeaway.
Caribou it's so awesome to have hit the migration. I happened to hit the migration when I was in the Brooks as well. And I have a memory, probably, similar to you. We've both done a lot of outdoor stuff, and I've had a lot of run-ins, wolves, bears, grizz, black, moose, you name it, all the ones. But nothing compares to the caribou migration, man. And maybe I imagine it's on a similar scale of like the whatever they call the Great Migrations in Africa, like the gazelles or
those over there.
Or
it's
some
gotta
of those,
be something
but
like that.
Holy cow, man! I remember walking over a valley. I specifically remember like the night before, we were camped like just shy of a little ridge, and we were backpacking, and like we woke up, or I think that evening we saw like a couple caribou on the ridge, kind of like checking us out, big racks, like 3 of them, just like the most picturesque thing ever, like silhouetted in the midnight sun, like red kind of burning sun, silhouetted on the ridge. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. And then the next morning we wake up and like walk down over the ridge, and yeah, exactly like you were saying, like in my mind I always think of it like Lord of the Rings. There's a scene where like name that battle scene where they're like they come over the ridge and like ride down into like Gandalf leads the troops down into the valley, and like everybody parts, and it was just like we were like 4 guys walking through, and literally like the herd of like 10,000 caribou would just like part like the Red Sea, and we just like walk through the center of them, and just insane.
Yeah. That's exactly how it was on the raft. Like you look on the left side of the river and it's just all caribou, like just looking you up and down like, whoa, what are you doing here? Then you look on the right and it's the same thing. Just like you're in the one strip going right through them. And it's like, I'm like you said, I've seen a lot of wildlife in a lot of settings around the world. And this is like one of the few times that I've like had tears in my eyes, just like looking at this. It was wild.
Yeah, it is like, wild.
Didn't emotionally know how to react, but yeah.
The other thing that I always think about with the caribou herd is that when I was in the Brooks, I think I asked you earlier, but how were the mosquitoes when you were there?
We got so lucky. Okay, so we had no bugs.
Amazing.
Up until like so in Coldfoot coming in, we had pretty bad mosquitoes. They were rough. So we're like, oh man, this is gonna be gnarly. Like there were probably 1,000 of them that got into our bush plane, like on our ride
geez.
up. And yeah, so you're like, wow, okay, we're in for a couple weeks of this, 3 weeks of this. This is gonna be a time. You land, no bugs, no flies, nothing. And we had that till our very last day on the tundra, and then we got bombarded by them.
Well, that ain't too bad.
We got so lucky, like not bad at all. And bombarded by them was really nothing. There were like, 20 of them on you at a time compared to when we flew back to Coldfoot. The swarms were so thick down there. I think they were like blacking out the sky above your tent.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I'm exaggerating that it was darker because how many mosquitoes are in the air.
I'll never forget when I was like taking photos. I remember like, you take a still photo and there's like 50 mosquitoes like buzzing, like, in focus in the photo. And then there's like 50 behind it that are like out of focus. It's like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah.
one of the things specifically that I remember with the mosquitoes and caribou was that when we were there, we had terrible mosquitoes for like the first part of the trip, and then like a day or two before we ran into the caribou, all of the mosquitoes disappeared. And
Wow.
we had didn't really put two and two together. We hadn't seen the caribou yet with why. And then like 2 days later, we run into that caribou herd and we realized like, why would mosquitoes be sticking around for 4 smelly dudes, even though I'm sure they love it. But when they have like 10,000 caribou here, they just, completely vampire on all day 24/7. And so the caribou herd just like sucked all of the mosquitoes in the whole valley away from us.
Oh man, some silver lining right there. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the mosquitoes are like when they're bad, they're enough to make you go a little bit crazy.
No doubt. No doubt. Especially for you Colorado folk. You don't have any bugs out there. You're spoiled.
We're so soft in Colorado.
So soft with the mosquitoes.
There's anything you learn going around the world, Colorado folks are pretty soft.
As far as the bugs.
Yeah, exactly.
No bugs in that dry climate. Yeah, you come out to the Midwest, northern Wisconsin or Minnesota on a summer trip, you better have your bug net.
I know. I don't have enough blood in me to give it otherwise.
How about other wildlife on the trip outside of the caribou?
So yeah, it started out like seeing that wolf like right at our first camp, right on the runway. That was pretty crazy. We didn't see any grizzly bears,
really,
which the pilot had said he had dropped off a couple, or maybe he must have picked up a couple hikers a couple days before us, and they said there was a couple bears like getting into their food at one camp.
Uh-oh.
So we avoided that part of the river because that's never any good, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise to not see a grizzly bear, but I really like bears, so it would have been cool to see one of those up there. The best pictures I've got of wildlife was this Arctic fox. He came right up to me. He was like maybe 10 feet away, and it's just that silver white. He was shedding a little bit, and you could see the brown coming through underneath him. That was really cool. On our way out, so like we had everybody else had flown out, and so my parents were on this trip with me, and my dad and I were really the only ones with firearms experience before. So we knew the plane was coming back that day. He's like, it's great weather, I'll be back, it'll be about a 3-hour round trip. So like about 2.5 hours waiting for him. We're like, well, got a bunch of like
got a bunch of rounds,
ammo in these guns.
Burning a hole in my
might
pocket.
as well shoot these things off. Yeah. So, we're like, all right, like set this can up, go ahead. Whoever shoots it first gets the last beer on the trip, that type of deal. And we left a couple slugs as a super just in case, but we'd been on this island for a day or 2 days waiting for the plane already. And so we're like, okay, bears not really going to be a thing. Anyway, our pilot lands and he's like, all right, guys, load up real quick. We got to get out of here because there's a polar bear that I just flew over like 2 miles down the street.
Oh my
And
gosh.
like, yeah, we're like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, let's pack up really fast. So packed up, flew out, and I didn't get any pictures of him or anything, but yeah, sitting down, like kind of walking towards our camp out on the pack ice was a polar bear.
Insane.
Yeah, that was cool. And polar bears are those scare me. That was the one thing out there. Actually, there's two things out there that scared me. One was part of the rafting called off ice, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the other one was the polar bears,
Okay.
as a just in case.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, they're known to be super dangerous. If I'm not like mistaken, I always heard that they were known to be like one of the few animals that'll hunt humans.
Yeah, I think it's like them and crocodiles, right?
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah. So we didn't want anything to do with that.
And what was the other thing you mentioned there? Something ice?
Yeah, okay. So there's this stuff called Aufeis, which it's German. I think it's AUF ice. And I never heard of it before, but it's a thing in probably northern Germany, but northern Europe and like northern Alaska that during the winters, the river completely freezes over. And then in a couple places, it'll really hold the ice. And when it melts out, sometimes the river will just tunnel right underneath it, and that's a pretty scary situation being in a raft if you came around a corner and there's an ice bridge that you
Could collapse
you
any
can't go
moment.
under that. Well, it's 8 inches off the water, so
Oh,
you're gonna
jeez.
yeah, like
You're gonna boof
it's
it.
kind of a, yeah, you better. But but yeah, I was like, don't. That's the last thing you could possibly do is go underneath one of those. So we actually had 7 sections of ice on this
Wow.
trip, and that was we got lucky. So there's an imagery satellite called Landsat, and it releases images. It's kind of like what like Google Earth would be built off of,
Okay.
right? But it releases tentative images like every time it makes a flyover an area. And we had images from 3 days before we went. So we had a pretty good idea where the ice was. And we even knew that a couple of them had channels already like all the way through on the water. But you still have to scout all of these because obviously it's a pretty substantial hazard. Anyway, we got really lucky. There were channels all the way through all of our off ice sections, but they were um, pretty crazy. You're rafting right next to like a 20-foot wall of ice.
Holy
That's
cow.
just occasionally one would like fall into the river, like kind of near you, create like this 1 or 2 foot wave, push you over a little bit. It's like
Ridiculous.
I've never seen anything like that. Never even thought it was a hazard. Then you'd be rafting down with an iceberg coming down with you.
And so I'm picturing you're like uh we have like culverts sometimes in Wisconsin. They have like a culvert between two lakes, and
Hmm.
it's like every once in a while you have to like canoe through or take your boat through a little culvert to connect to a little lake. That's kind of what I'm picturing, but like massive ice and like 100-mile-an-hour water.
Yeah, that's actually not too far from the truth. So a couple places you'd have ice on both sides, and you'd be in this like ice canyon, with it's 10 to 20 foot tall ice on either side of you. Usually we would be kind of on shore, but you'd have a cliff and ice between you, and this water's probably going like 10 to 15 miles an hour in places,
It's
which
moving.
as a river goes, that's really, really high gradient, really fast. And so you're just like cruising through this ice canyon, and it's just like the deepest blue ice you've ever seen in your life with a couple white streaks of banding coming through it.
Crazy.
It was yeah, pretty special.
How did it progress from the brooks at near the headwaters as you got out towards the Arctic Ocean? Because the brook stuff I've done is like more central, basically, yeah, more central and I guess kind of south. Haven't really done as much the north stuff, and especially out towards the Arctic Ocean.
Yeah, the surprise for me was how quickly the mountains were over. So there was only one day of like real substantial rapids on our trip, and it was the last day in the mountains. So you're like, finally not just like cruising through braided streams really fast. You're actually hitting holes, really, really rafting the boat. So you're having like fun. You're putting a lot of miles in, and all of a sudden you take a turn, and there's like a couple little hills left. You're in the foothills, and then it's dead flat. Just
Really?
perfectly flat plain out there. Yeah, the foothills are like 2 miles. Used to Colorado, where you got 20 miles of foothills before you get to any sort of real mountain. It's kind of like the Grand Canyon. I don't know how you feel about that, but you kind of take this right-hand turn down just above Pierce Ferry, if you've ever done it, for the listeners, and all of a sudden you've been in this huge canyon for days and days, and then it's just gone. It's flat.
Yeah. Huh, interesting. So how long was that part of the trip where it was just completely flat tundra? I assume it's still tundra, right?
It is tundra, yeah. So we maximized our time in the mountains because it's definitely more picturesque up there. But I think we still did spend it would have been 7 days down on the flat spots. So
okay, so roughly about half and half.
Yeah, you gotta maybe a third down on the lower part. You gotta still make some good river miles down there, and we had to we were planning to actually spend more time down there, but then we had to push to make our bush plane exit.
Sure.
Out of there.
Huh, cool, man. Well, that sounds like an amazing trip. Sounds like a blast. It seems like you're singing the praises, I assume.
Yeah, like I would go back there in a hurry if I could, as long as I didn't get eaten by the mosquitoes. Nah, I think I would take the mosquitoes to be up there. It'd be just fine.
And so you started, you got your start in rafting. You grew up in Idaho Springs, Colorado. And so
Sure did.
You got your start basically running with the Clear Creek rafting crew. Or what's the company that you were always working with?
Yeah, it's called Clear Creek Rafting. So pretty creative name.
And so how did you get started with them, and when did you get started like rafting and getting into that world?
Yeah, so I think my parents bought our first raft when I was like 8 or 9 years old. So kind of been rafting since I was a kid, and just ran most of the western rivers. We'd spend a lot of weekends going out just rafting, whether it's on the Arkansas or go further, do something on the Colorado or like the Deschutes, something like that. Then the last summer I was in high school, they would have like a parking lot kid. They would tell people where to park. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. But it's a horrible job. It's like you're just sitting in the hot sun being like, wow, I'm so bored right now. But I'll do that if I can do guide training next year and guide commercially. So I'm like, all right, you can do that. And then yes, freshman year of college. So I'd be 18. You have to be 18 to be a river guide in Colorado. I trained for river guiding and
seems like
guided
a good rule.
with them. Yeah, I wouldn't want some like 13-year-old being like, all right, listen to me, I'm the expert here. But I don't know if I'd want an 18-year-old doing that either. But
I agree. Someone's got to.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I did that for full time in the summers for like 7 or 8 years. Then after I got a different job, I still would go up there on weekends and did it for about 10 years overall working for them. So it was a good time up there. A lot of river miles that you get in.
I believe that. The rafting culture is so funny, man. The raft company, especially like the raft company culture, because I've been to a few different commercial trips. I still love going on it, and we always used to come out and go with you at least once a year on Clear Creek. But it's just so funny. It's just like a bunch of 18 to like 21, 22-year-old, 23-year-old kids sleeping in their cars all summer long in the parking lot, Choco tans, just loving life. It's so funny.
Yeah, your diet is like cereal, and like you're like, oh man, I had a strip of bacon today. It's so good. Yeah, it's oh man, if I won like the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably quit my job and go work commercial rafting again. Honestly, like I loved it so much. It's such a good life, and your job that you do is what other people pay to do on vacation. So
Totally. Only problem
yeah.
is unless you own the rafting company, it's it's
Yeah.
good for a summer job as a kid, right? Not
Yeah,
always.
exactly.
You could there's plenty of people that make a go of it, so I shouldn't say that, but yeah.
It's rare, but yeah, a lot of people do like kind of stick around and do it for life, and more power to them. They
Absolutely.
probably have a lot more fun than I do right now.
No doubt, no doubt. What's the like the mecca of rafting? Like for instance, obviously you have like the 8,000 meter peaks for mountain climbers. For canoeing, for whatever reason, it seems like it's like Hudson Bay. There's like a aura around Hudson Bay, and just like the rivers of the north and northern Canada and such. Is there like a mecca or like a Mount Rushmore of rafting?
I probably cliche, but I gotta say it's the Grand Canyon. At least
Totally.
as far as North America goes. Like if you were talking to somebody from Costa Rica, I'm sure they have a river down there. They tell you, but I think anybody that's in the United States at least would tell you that it's the Grand Canyon, which it's that's a really special, really spectacular trip.
God,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
How many times have you done it?
I've run it 3 times now, which I wish it was 30 to be honest.
Seriously. And
Hopefully I'll get up there.
so we did our trip together in 2018 with a group. How big was our group? I'm terrible with numbers, so
Think we had 14 or
that's
15
that's
of
what I always
us.
say, 14 as well. And is it 23 days? Is that right?
Yeah, I think we did 23, or it might have been 25
It might have been.
down
I
all
think
the
you're
way to
right,
Pierce. So
actually.
you get 23 in Grand Canyon National Park, and then there's after Diamond, the takeout there, you can do an additional 2, and I think we did that.
And so you did one trip before our trip, and
Hmm.
then you did one trip after.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, just what an amazing river, huh?
Yeah, like our trip in particular was really special. I mean, the group of people we had was probably the most fun of the groups I've gone with. So that goes without saying. But that then we got that high water release, and that's pretty rare.
That was
Like,
just mind blowing. So explain to me like I'm a layman the high water release that we had because I still don't always know like what the normal levels and such are.
oh man, so normal levels you have like pretty decent rapids. I don't think anything there is like too technical, but
Sure. For
there's some really
you,
big holes.
for me, and
Well,
I was that was freaking crazy.
yeah.
The
Well, yeah,
whitewater.
going from Clear Creek where you have to be, precise within
Yeah,
a
it's not
couple inches
technical.
when you're running the big water there, but here you just need to like move your raft.
Yeah, it's
Big
like
rafts, moving them.
big water.
And
It's not like it's creaky and technical. It's more like I'm gonna punch you in the face, and if you get hit with this haymaker, you're done.
yeah, exactly. But so that's like the normal situation. And we knew when they were going to do the release. They tell you a couple weeks ahead of time, so we knew the exact day, about the time they would hit us.
So there's a dam
So we
there's a dam above the famous Grand Canyon section that regulates the flow. It's a hydroelectric dam, right? That
Yep.
regulates the flow of the water that goes through the Grand Canyon. And typically they have scheduled releases where they might bump it up at night a little bit, or they might, you know, fluctuate things a little bit. And as they fluctuate that level, they can also play with like the hydrodynamics of the whole river, right? So like where sediment and sand gets relayed or gets like, filled in, resilted, however you want to say it, from that high water, which I think may have played a part into the release that we were on, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly why they did our release. On a day-to-day basis, they might regulate it 2 to 4,000 CFS, and that's just to accommodate the power demand, like the electricity that the dam is generating. But for us, they did that big release because it's going to flush all of the sediment out of the bottom of the dam and replenish sediment down in the canyon. kind of fill in sand where there used to be or should be, and it had been eroded away. And it really worked. I was surprised how, like, we would pull up to camps after the release and there would be huge mud beaches all of a sudden that you could tell had never been touched before. But during the actual release, I remember we took our layover day and we're camping.
And how big was
there?
Wasn't it like, I want to say it was like tenfold of the amount of water that that was originally in the river.
Yeah, I want to say it went up from like 10,000, like 8 to 10,000, all the way up to, it was like 39 to 44,000.
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember.
44,000 is pretty stompy.
Yeah, it's a lot of water. Yeah, and so as you were saying, our campsite.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we're like, all right, we know we got to camp high. Let's. One of the guys on our trip, Logan DeMarcus, he had some beta. He had guided down there, and he's like, hey, where should we camp high? And they're like, all right, go to this spot.
Because we're thinking in our minds that we have to pick the highest camp we can because this dam release is coming sometime tonight. We don't know how much, we know they say it's going to be 44,000 CFS, cubic feet per second, but we don't know what that means as far as how high the river is going to go from where it is now to 44,000 CFS. So it's kind of like it's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah. And we got lucky in the gamble, I would say. Man, we camped like 20 vertical feet above the river, somewhere about there. And by the time it was at its peak, there wasn't a single one of us there that weren't like, oh man, we are so screwed right now. Like this is coming through our kitchen and that's the end of us. But yeah,
funny.
It came up to maybe like a foot or 2 feet of our kitchen, and I could not believe how much more water was there. Then actually rafting it, like there's so much water pushing you, and there's so many big rapids down there. You'd have that guidebook that everybody that does the Grand has in front of them, and it was useless because you'd be like, well, I have no idea where I'm at. There's not a rapid here. The whole river's moving at 30 miles an hour. There's a tree the size of like, a giant pine tree is floating down right next to me, and I can't even row. And just huge lateral waves peeling off the sides of the canyon. That was pretty wild.
It was insane, man. And the main things I remember about that are, I remember three or four main things. One, I remember like watching the river rise because we stopped and we expected the river to rise like overnight / through the next day because we were, I don't know how far down, but 100 miles maybe less, 50 miles down from the dam. So the water takes a while to travel all the way down to you. So we had it a pretty well timed when we thought it might hit, but we weren't sure. And I'll never forget like watching the river rise, and it was like pulsing and like breathing as like the outcropped rocks. Like if you imagine a canyon and there's some like overhanging rocks, as the water fills that in, there would be air that would be trapped in that like overhang, underneath the overhang, and like bubbling out and like burping the Grand Canyon. And it was just so crazy to watch the turbulence of that water coming down.
Yeah, it's exactly like just the life of the water just pulsing through it.
Absolutely.
And it was hours of being like, well, I've been watching that rock right there, and oh wait, no, that rock's gone now. It's 3 feet beneath the water.
Yep.
Well, I'm watching this next rock right here, and I know it's not going to get up. Oh, it's above that rock now too.
Oh, so nerve-wracking. And the two other main things I remember is one, Alex, our buddy Alex, he was sleeping in the Ducky, which is like a little inflatable kayak, basically. Rather than sleeping in a sleeping pad, he was sleeping in a Ducky, and he was at the lowest spot. Of course, he's the the classic, not worried about it, no big deal, we'll be fine. And he was sleeping in his Ducky, and I forget what happened, but some in the middle of the night he got up and moved a little higher or something like that. But I remember in the morning waking up and like as the river was rising, looking down, the rock that he had been sleeping on in the Ducky was completely submerged, like completely underwater. He would have just been floating down the Grand Canyon in the
I
middle of the
remember
night.
that too. It was like, oh man, well, he's gone now. No, no, I don't know why he moved up, but yeah, he was like sleeping in the middle of the kitchen. It was like the last dry spot in the camp.
Yeah, the other thing about that whole camp is that we were so high. When the river was low, it was like, hiking all of our gear, the whole kitchen, all the rafting gear, all the food, all your tents, sleeping gear, hiking all that stuff. Literally, it had to be at least 20 vertical feet up the canyon. You're like, the water's never going to get here. And then you don't realize it until the water is like right at your feet. It's like, yeah, we're 20 vertical feet up, but we're camped like in a little valley, like a little bowl, 20 vertical feet up. So like, if the water does crest the one lowest spot, like this whole thing is just filling in.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, there was like an eddy on the backside where we were, and it was swirling up canyon hard enough that it was like, oh man, it's definitely coming over.
It was
the top.
like a little low saddle point. And I remember, I think it was Mark or someone, like we had like, is it, how's the water over there? And he's like, we're still good. How's it over there? We're still good.
It was Mark. I remember that.
Yeah, everybody paranoid that the whole camp was going to flood. Oh man,
yeah,
fun times.
Couple meetings of people being like, all right, everybody needs to group up. What do we do right now? All right, we should all just wait it out still.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's not much to do. Wait it out or pack up the boats and go floating down the Grand in the middle of the night.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. What an amazing place. Amazing trip. I need to get back on a Grand Canyon trip for sure.
I know. I apply for permits every year and never won yet, but we all need to, so we get that one friend that gets it.
Exactly. What are there any other rivers, particular just because I'm a river guy? I know there's plenty of other outdoor stuff we get into, but are there any other like river trips on your periphery or on your like maybe bucket list?
Oh yeah. I would really love to go down to Mendoza and run the Mendoza River. That's down in Argentina.
Okay.
I have several friends that were working at Clear Creek rafting that would kind of do the seasonal thing, but they would be summer year round. So their summer is our winter down south of the equator. So yeah, the river down there is just like this chocolate milk river that's so full of sediment, and it's just huge tumbling holes going right out of the huge mountains, kind of down in like it's not quite to Patagonia, but same mountain range.
That sounds awesome.
I guess it's the Andes. So that's my bucket list river.
Okay.
Right now.
Sweet, sounds great. And how about you've done all kinds of traveling for your work as a geophysicist? What are some of your traveling highlights, or I guess, what are some of the places you've been traveling that maybe are unique or different, and what are some of the places that are memorable or stick out?
So, been all around like the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, kind of the Middle East. That it's always interesting going there. It's not my favorite part of the world, but there are pretty parts in it.
Obviously,
you're in Oman.
You're doing all this stuff for work, so it's not like you're out there,
touring around. I'm not in the pretty parts of these countries. Sure. I'm in the other parts of these countries. Oman is a really, really beautiful country there. It's just right on the Persian Sea, I think is what the sea is, and it's just this blue sea, and then these giant like 8,000 or 9,000 foot mountains coming out of it. So that's pretty cool. I did have to spend a little over 4 months in India at one point.
Okay.
Yeah. India is a little bit different. If you're in like nice India, where we'll get into a couple stories here or there. If you're in like nice India, like where tourists go, so like New Delhi or Goa, it's one of the prettiest countries. The people are so nice. It's beautiful. The food is excellent. Like there's that, and then there's where I was in India, which you can imagine that Pakistan is kind of like a little U shape and it cradles parts of India.
Okay.
I was between 5 and 15 kilometers from the Pakistani border. And
Okay.
they don't love each other.
Right.
They've gone to
Hostile.
war several times right in that region.
Yeah. What is
While
that?
I was there,
What is that region? That border strip called? It's one of the most.
so this where I was is called Rajasthan.
Okay.
But kind of north of that is Kashmir.
Right.
And,
Kashmir.
and they kind of fight over that one a lot. So, but yeah, they were pretty not super happy with each other while I was there to begin with. So always have like these military convoys going by because of this. And this part of India is not that nice anyway. I had 3 like fully armed bodyguards with me
Oh wow.
there the whole time. Yeah, and that that kind of turned into a whole situation of its own.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so company I work for hired their firm in India, so they were run through this guy from India and all that, and he was a little bit shady, I guess, and wasn't paying his employees, and they'd been out in the desert with me for 3 months.
Uh-oh.
And as I was leaving, they're like, "Hey, dude, we have not been paid. Like, what's going on with that?" I'm like, "Well, my company has paid your company. Like, you need to talk to your boss and arrange that. Like, I feel for you. Like, I think the hottest we saw out there, and we're working outside, was 50 degrees Celsius, which I think is like 121, 122
Oh my gosh.
degrees Fahrenheit. It's
Is
horrible.
What type of geography are we in? Is this the desert?
It's desert, but it's really humid on top of everything, if you could believe that. So it's
Jeez.
a 120-degree humid heat that you're working in
Wow.
any given day. It's unbearable. It's like it's really deadly, to be honest. Like, yeah, my company won't send me there anymore. Thank goodness. They're like, man, that is not worth the risk. So,
And so
but,
how did this
yeah.
play out?
Well, so on the way out, like they kind of like changed their mentality a little bit. You know, I'd been with these guys for 3 months, and I can't speak. I think they spoke Hindi, and so I can't speak that. But you like pick up on some like body signals and stuff, and all of a sudden they're being really cold to me on our drive out. But I'm like, all right, well, we're going to the airport, so that's cool.
Sure.
And halfway to the airport, we're in like the middle of the desert. They pull the car over there and they like get us out of the car. You know, they have like their AK-47s sitting in their laps, and
The
they're like, all right,
bodyguards?
yeah.
Okay.
They're like, all right, dude, here's a phone. Get us our money.
Jeez.
Yeah. So looking back at it, I refer to this as a soft hostage situation. You know, I was never like really worried for my health, and I was like, yeah, man, you guys deserve your money. This
Right.
is ridiculous. You haven't been paid. And at the same time, I'm like, all right, a dude with a gun just pulled me out of a car in the middle of India and told me to get him his money. I am like really freaking worried right now.
Holy cow.
And I don't know what their boss said to them on the phone, but eventually, after like 30 minutes or so, made some deal with them. They brought me to the airport, and I didn't even wave getting out of the car. I was
No,
like,
what
dude,
are
I
you
am
going to
out
say?
of
Like,
here.
hey, thanks for the good time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, wouldn't really recommend that company in India.
Holy
If you're looking
cow.
for a bodyguard out there.
Jeez Louise, what an experience. What
Yeah,
yeah, like what's going through your mind as like as they first pull over?
I kind of had some idea because I was
Yeah,
like,
you
all
had
right,
weird there's
like,
weird vibes going.
little bit of weird vibes. And you know, the day before that they had asked me about this money thing, so I was like a little worried, but not too worried until they're like, all right, you know, get out of the car. It's like, okay, this is actually like kind of a real situation that I need to be pretty worried about.
Right.
So just glad it all worked out. I don't know
Holy
if they
cow.
made their money, but I you know, to this day, I hope they did get their money. They were out in the hot desert for months and months, man.
Hey, I hear you. Man's got to be paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Um
Yeah, another.
How about we talked a little bit about this at the wedding, but you always hear I always hear about the driving in India. I've never been. I love to go. I want to go, but describe to me the driving scene in India, or at
All
least
right,
where you were.
so it's like their busiest interstate in this part of the country. So our equivalent to like I-40 or I-70, something like that. Except it's just a two-lane road. There's no central barrier in it, and yeah, cars are passing each other left and right, and you'll be passing a truck on a blind corner of this two-lane road, and you come around this corner and there's somebody else passing a truck. So you're four wide passing each other on a blind corner, like almost touch mirrors, swerve around a cow on the exit, and like I could not look out the window. I'm not afraid of driving like in the United States. And out there I was like, I need to have blinders on. If I do, I'm gonna have a heart attack and like die of high blood pressure just watching this. And the drivers are so chill the whole time. They like
Just another day in
doesn't
life.
phase them. That yeah,
It's just absolute
Yeah,
mayhem. It sounds scary,
it's so
but also
scary.
sounds fascinating.
It's yeah, and then you get past that cow, and there's like this dude with four of his children on his like 1970s Yamaha bike, and you're like, yeah, dude, get after it.
So funny.
Yeah. You could not pay me to drive in India though. If you ever go, definitely get a driver there. Don't try it on your own.
How about any other work trips or work destinations that, or just travel in general, travel destinations that maybe are something not maybe something a little unique or off the beaten path that you find interesting?
Honestly, India really takes the cake on all of those. Yeah, like I've been around parts of Asia to like some parts of China and Japan, and those are pretty cool. They're much more pretty, but just the rawness and the craziness of India is especially where I was in India. It was far and away wilder than anything I've ever seen.
I believe
Yeah,
it. I need to get there.
yeah. The food is worth it. I've got to say, if you've got a strong stomach, I don't know. I didn't get sick once. Everybody around me got sick. Maybe I just got really lucky. So
That's funny. Yeah, it's definitely on the list. I need to go. I've always heard cool things, and it just sounds up my alley too. Kind of raw, wilds, like not touristy, fluffed up.
yeah, man, there were at the hotel we were at, a couple people would come through, and these like British guys on one of those like tuk-tuks, like the little three-wheeled cars that
Yep.
it's kind of a cab in most places. They're like, yeah, well, we retired and we're just going to drive this for like 1,000 miles till it blows up out here. So,
That sounds like a fun
so
trip.
maybe that's the trip that we need to plan next.
That sounds wild. Tuk tuk across India.
Yeah, I don't know if I have it in me, but but I could probably be convinced.
Yeah, seriously, twist my rubber arm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Dude. Well, hey, this has been. I'm gonna wind her down, but this has been. It's been fun, man. I've enjoyed talking rivers and traveling and camping and the Brooks Range. I mean, we got to go up there, and maybe we got to get something planned for next summer.
Yeah, I like definitely let's stay in contact, man, because I'm really down to go back. I'd love to go backpacking and spend just more time in those mountains. Anything. Or maybe canoe some of those pretty fast rivers, but
Yeah, pack
we could
raft.
try something.
Pack
Pack
raft.
raft would be the way to go.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'd be into that.
And what do you have coming up? Anything you're looking forward to coming up?
Nah, I kind of tapped well, I guess I'm going to Whistler up in Canada to ride bikes for a couple weeks at the end of August.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
yeah, but that's a much more level-headed trip than a lot of these other ones.
Hey, you need those.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Alec, well, thanks for taking some time, man. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been good catching up with you, too.
All right, there you have it. Episode 49 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors with Alec Beraducci. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast if you're enjoying the show. We have new episodes that drop the first and third Friday of every month. Also, you can check out more info, buffaloroamer.com. I've got some of the guided trips we have. I got a trip coming up to the Yukon shortly that I'm looking forward to. We got, I have some fishing blog write-ups on there, trip to the Amazon River or to the Amazon drainage. I have, some journal entries from both the Mississippi and Yukon River trip, so all kinds of fun stuff, buffaloroamer.com. Okay, until next time, take it easy, enjoy it, get some fresh air.